Now everyone's saying it. If you drive less, you pay less for car insurance. But how much less? A tad less. A smidge less. Around 20%-ish less? Or a whole lot less? Like 70% less for comprehensive car insurance from South Africa's hottest pay-per-K insurer, Chili from King Price. We're big into less. Like 70% less. Visit kingprice.co.za for a quote.
Welcome to Let's Talk Automotive. I'm Peter Fillion, and I'm joined this afternoon, early evening, by my old friend and colleague and an absolute legend of the motor industry, Mr. Brett Cowell. And Brett and I are going to be taking you through a driving review of the awesome new Mazda CX5. So welcome, Brett.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be a legend. Not so sure, but I'll do my best.
Well, I think let's maybe kick off with some of the design philosophies of Mazda. One thing I wanted to say is that I learned something new today about Mazda, and that is that they were originally a cork manufacturer.
And that's the strange positioning of this brand. They started out as such a sensible corporate kind of company. Now you look at where they are as actually a very emotive brand. And that's, I think, why we like it.
We absolutely do, and I've got to tell you that the styling cues that are coming out of Mazda in their models of late is just absolutely stunning, and you've got a bit of a story to tell me about their design philosophy.
So the design philosophy of Mazda is labeled as Kodo, which means the soul of motion, which just positions the brand so wonderfully. It's not this real sensible brand. It's this emotional styling language. And you just look at the front of the car and you've got this shape of this grille, this bottom element here, which looks very similar to the shape in the logo. And then as it comes around to the light, a little detail, this shape here, this gap here, some engineer had to sign that off. You look at the costing in here versus the design execution.
But I mean,
that's
the engineers
Mazda.
had a rational reason to give to the bean counters, and that is to do with the other design philosophy, which involves lights and shadows, and you can only get that if you have a gap.
Exactly, and then as it flows through the rest of the car, which is also just, when you look at a 6.5 on the road, the way that shape flows, this line on the bonnet, the shape into the light, and as it goes down the side of the vehicle, nothing else looks like it on the road.
Well, I've got to say, Brett, I have been completely blown over by the designs that Mazda have been bringing out of late. I've got to say that they're probably one of the few Japanese manufacturers at the moment that, for me, get it in terms of a nice flowing design. So enough of that. Let's take advantage of the car that we've got and let's go for a nice test drive. So I've had the benefit of driving the car for just under a week. And I've had the benefit of driving it during the day and at night. So I do, have the advantage of, for example, experiencing these unbelievable LED lights and the active lights as well. So I've got to tell you, the lighting on the vehicle is superb. So I'm going to be very keen to see your observations now that you're driving it.
What you've planted the seed in my brain is like those features are, in my understanding, those are premium brand features.
Absolutely.
Those are what you get on your luxury cars. Yet in essence, the strategy here is that this is, we typically label it as from an industry point of view, a volume brand.
Yeah.
But then the strategy here surely must be then, why must I buy a premium brand when I can actually get all the features in this, And
isn't it Mazda's sort of stated objective or strategy to be an alternative to a premium brand?
But not a premium pricing.
Correct.
And that's the key discussion. What is as a salesperson, we would talk about the value proposition.
Yeah.
Now, the value proposition of this vehicle with this spec at this price point, do I need to buy one of those really expensive?
I mean, look at it. Think about this. I mean, when I got into the car for the first time, one of the things that struck me was it really is a premium cockpit. I'm going to say this out loud, and maybe it'll be a bit controversial, but a lot of the features that I see on this car remind me of Audi. So this 8-inch display with the menus is to me, I'm not saying it's exactly like Audi, but it reminded me of Audi, even the colors. If I look at, how we operate the system as well. So I'll toggle over here and the buttons and
they label like MMI, they have their multimedia interface. And
this reminds me of Audi, which is a good thing. I think it's a compliment to what Mazda's achieved in terms of the finish, the stitching over here is absolutely fantastic.
If I can get a bit geeky quickly, I've got, we can't see it in camera, but I've got my heads-up display here and it's showing me my speed and my directions and my speed limit information. And that's things that you get on that other German premium brand from Bavaria.
So let's look at some of the features that we found on this. So obviously we've got a sport and a comfort setting that we can adjust. Interesting for me, we saw this on the CX3. And I need to maybe apologize to Mazda at this point because I criticized this part here heavily, which I thought was just a blank. It turns out it's actually the display to check if your rear seat occupants have got their seatbelt on. One of the things that we are experiencing right now is a car that is incredibly quiet. I mean, I've been quite astounded at how quiet the cabin is. And I did a bit of research on that and Mazda went into great detail in terms of making sure that some of the weak spots, typically where sound ingresses into the cabin, are suitably, how can I put it, soundproofed?
Insulated almost.
And insulated, that's the word I was looking for. But one thing that really rocked my boat was it's got double insulated windows, which is what you find on really premium segment cars.
The premium features for non-premium money. And I stated as we were in the car, my first statement was I really like this car, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. It is those kind of details that appeal to me as the potential customer.
There is one compromise though that I think Mazda has made on this, and I understand it, so it's not necessarily a criticism. The motor. I find the motor to be a little bit underwhelming for a vehicle this size. Having said that, I live 55 kilometers away from my office and was not uncomfortable in terms of maintaining a steady 120, 130 on the highway. But it did struggle on the uphills. It had to downshift to maintain any sort of speed. And at those downshift levels, I did find the engine to be a little bit noisy. But I mean, that's
when you're working it,
when I'm working it, it's noisy. For the rest, it's fine. It's nice and quiet.
So then, we talk about that engine. Is it right for the package and the price point?
And that's going to be ultimately tested by the customer, which seems to be working because the CX5 represents around about 25% of Mazda's sales. So it's a significant contributor towards their volumes.
Which means the recipe's right.
Yeah.
And that's really my thing about this car. And I think fair context, I'm an industry consultant, so I've worked with numerous brands and I've been involved with these kinds of products for a long time. And the SUV recipe has just improved in leaps and bounds over time.
I just want to end off with our interior experience and our driver experience with just some other indicators for me in terms of the detail of the design. And detail is always very important for me. And so if we open up the center console over here, first of all, we've got this tray, which is just magnificent. So, this is where I've decided to put the key, because it is a keyless entry and it has a start-stop button. And instead of it getting lost inside there, it's nice and convenient.
If I can just be a little bit of a geek and just mention how there's this padding on the bottom.
Yeah, so it doesn't rattle. Yeah, for sure. And then we've got our USBs inside here as well.
There's this little groove here, and if I just pull this cable out that we've got here, that I plug my phone in, but then I've got this little groove here
to protect the cable. So
I'm not pinching a cable. Who thinks of that?
Well, clearly Mazda does.
Mazda does.
Okay, so Brett, we've had an unbelievable drive in the vehicle. And, in the introduction, we focused on the front of the vehicle. I thought with the summarizing of the vehicle and our rankings that we're going to apply to the car, let's just briefly talk about some of the design elements that we found on the rear of the vehicle. And you had some interesting things to show me.
I just love detail of design. So, you've got a beautiful looking vehicle. How do they create that? So there's, like, for example, this wonderful shape here. It comes from the front, that line flows down. And also the way they create these wonderful shapes in the light. But there's also an element of real geekiness, the real engineering kind of airflow discussion. So to bring things like the drag coefficient down, you've got this, what looks like a little panel, but it's got that shape that acts like as an air kicker, or it shears the air to reduce the drag. So you've got a more fuel efficient vehicle.
It cleans up the dirty airflow behind the back of the car, which is creating a low pressure zone, which kind of wants to pull the car back.
That's exactly
and it's not only here; it's also on the lights.
You've got these little touches, and you can just see even right down to that little shape on the wheel arch.
Yeah.
Again, it's this wonderful balancing act of design, of getting into that price point, of being beautiful, being sensible, that for me is what really, it's what the CX5 represents.
I mean, Brett, we could talk literally for hours on end about this vehicle.
Definitely.
It's been one of the vehicles that's impressed me the most, certainly this year, that we've reviewed. Now it's time for us to give our personal rankings from 1 to 10 on the Mazda CX5.
So, as the guest, thank you for the pressure. In its segment, and that for me is an important part of the scoring category. In its segment, I really think, I'd go 9 out of 10 instinctively, and it's for me almost 10 out of 10. It's maybe a few little things that you mentioned, those little spec things, but if they could maybe like one or two little spec features, like maybe, we discussed wireless charging as an example.
Yeah.
That would make, for me, then at that price point, this spec a 10 out of 10 car. So my official answer, 9 out of 10, almost 10 out of 10.
All right, so now I'm very close with you on that. I'm gonna knock it down a little bit more dramatically in terms of the score for the simple reason that I think that they missed an opportunity in terms of the motor that we found in the car. I found it a little bit underpowered, but at the end of the day, it comes down to driving style and choice. But for me, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
So I do think that means it's a great car.
Oh, absolutely, it's a great car. And on that note, we thank you for joining us on this review, and we look forward to seeing you next week.